Joe Richardson, Joe Speak Podcast. Like usual, listen, I always say that I've got a real good one this time, but I really, really, really mean that I've got a good one this time. So much so that I had to, after we put it together, we had to back up for a second and just reflect on it. And that's why I'm coming to you this way to start this particular broadcast. This is with Carl Douglas, who is a legendary civil rights attorney.
You were working in the law offices of Johnnie Cochran, and you had tried some really high-profile cases, right? Everything from Michael Jackson, Tupac Shakur, Queen Latifah, Jamie Foxx.
Who's been doing it more than 30 and close to 40 years. Also a Northwestern Wildcat undergrad, like my daughter. But in any event, born and raised in South Central Los Angeles. I think the irony with him is that some people just know him from the O.J. Simpson case. His mentor was Johnnie Cochran. And, he came up with Johnnie, was with Johnnie for many years, and now has his own law firm, Douglas Hicks Law. But the fact of the matter is, he is by no means, and never was he, civil rights attorney to the stars, or the criminal defense justice attorney for the stars, even though he's done things for stars like O.J. Simpson and Michael Jackson and things like that. He's been representing regular folks all day, every day for decades. And here's something I want you to get from Carl Douglas. We're going to give you the great parts, the juicy parts of the interview, talk a little bit about midway, about a big case he's working on right now that you may have seen in the news. But he is bombastic for justice.
This is wrong. So for the sheriff to attempt to justify it is no surprise.
So check out Carl Douglas and put him in the context of what's going on today. He's been on the front lines for a long time and mentored people like the Ben Crumps and some other folks. So we'll talk a little bit more as we go along here, but check out my interview with Carl Douglas, Joe Speak Podcast. Let's go. Tell me what you look for. I know, because I know you have people blow you up all the time about taking on cases because they know who you are. Your reputation precedes itself. They know that you're going to ride it till the wheels fall off, and once you're on the team, you're on the team, and you're trying to take a dribble drive and jump from the free throw line and slam dunk and do everything you need to do. What figures in, and what do you look for in the case that you ultimately take, and how much does do the things that are going on now, COVID-19, racial unrest, does that change your calculus at all? Does that put certain cases to the front? Tell me about your thought process in terms of saying, okay, this is what, Douglas Hicks Law is going to be taking on next.
Joe, every client that I ever talk to, I tell them two things. One, I suffer from terminal honesty.
All right.
So I'm going to tell you what I think, even if you may not want to hear it.
Right.
Everybody says, oh, Mr. Douglas, I love that. I love that. Until they hear the consequences of my honesty.
Right, sure.
The second thing I tell everybody is, in science, 2 + 2 is 4. In math, 2 + 2 is 4.
Right.
But in law, 2 + 2 is somewhere between 3 and 5.
Right. Right.
In law, every answer is, it depends.
Right, sure.
Am I going to win? It depends. How much am I going to win? It depends.
Right.
Do I have a good case? It depends. We probably get, I'm blessed, man. I get 8 to 10 calls a day
Sure.
for people asking that I represent them.
Right.
8 to 10 calls a day is 40 to 50 calls a week. I may meet face-to-face via Zoom 4 or 5 new clients a month, maybe.
Wow.
I may accept 8 to 10 cases a year, maybe.
Wow.
So I spend most of my time rejecting cases as opposed to accepting.
Wow.
One, I'm lucky, I'm blessed. And every day I am thankful for the privilege of having that option, because most lawyers don't have my circumstance. But two, for me to have your case, I have to have a visceral feeling about that case that strikes me in my gut. I have been representing families who have been injured because of the misconduct of police officers for almost 40 years. And my website says what we do is we help them put their lives back together, emotionally as much as financially. So I am on a mission. I tell folks every day, I may not die rich, my brother, but I'm gonna die with a smile on my face because I am doing good things for good people. I go through life trying to make your life better. And if I can make your life better, then that's all that the Creator wants me to do on earth. These police cases, man, I tell people all the time, they are never better than the first day that you hear about the case, the family comes in. Because every day from that point, you're going to hear information about the background of the person who was injured.
Yeah.
Or about what he was doing to bring the police there in the beginning anyway.
Right.
That's going to impact one's thoughts about the case and how you'll be able to represent this family best.
Right.
We police lawyers, man, we're gunslingers.
Right, sure.
We gotta win to get paid.
Right.
It is hard to sue a police officer because they are professional witnesses.
Right.
It's hard to sue a police officer because they enjoy the benefit of the doubt with the community. Mm-hmm. There are few programs that are more popular than law enforcement programs. Even when the cops on those programs walk up to the line, ultimately they're doing the right thing, and ultimately they're going to win, and justice in their sense of it is going to prevail. Years and years of that programming influences everyone who listens. Law and Order, for example, has been on TV for over 20 years.
Sure. Everybody loves it too, yeah.
I was a big fan of LA Law because I was a lawyer in LA, living LA Law.
Hey, this is me.
Hey, so that is what we are up against every day when we are saying this officer has done something that is contrary to his training and to his oath, and you have to hold him accountable, because if you don't, no one will. And you can look at what's going on in Los Angeles County and know that is so, my brother, because there have been, over the last 8 years, 600 people who have died at the hands of police officers in Los Angeles County. And the district attorney, a Black woman, has saw fit to file only one charge against those officers over 600 times. I will not accept the notion that there's only been one use of unreasonable force out of 600 deaths, because I sue from those same cases and I win more cases than I lose, because I see how there are failures to prosecute criminally, yet multi-million-dollar settlements that are paid out in jurisdictions across America. The problem is, it's hard prosecuting cops because they do enjoy unlimited benefit and credibility in the minds and the faces of most jurors, because implicit bias is alive and well, because most people are afraid of the anarchy that they think will befall them if there is not a strong police presence.
Right.
And the difficulty is the current president is fomenting that narrative.
Sure. Sure.
The Republicans are fomenting that narrative, bruh.
Mm.
One of their Republican created videos that they showed during the Republican convention that showed cars on fire in the streets was taken from a demonstration in Spain.
Sure. It's heavy. Yeah.
The Republican convention
Right.
talking about the anarchists
Right.
and why you need to vote Republican is taking footage from Spain that says they don't care about truth. They're pushing this narrative of fear. And it is that narrative that prevents the legislation in California from doing the right thing because they're succumbing to the pressure in an election year. Because young people may talk a good game, but they don't give money to their politicians, and they're not as reliable a voter
Sure.
as those that are older. So the challenge for all young people is not just to register, but to vote.
Right.
We can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Right.
It is, change, man, is like an ocean liner, not a speedboat.
Right. That's right.
Young people want it to be a speedboat. I've been young once. I did too.
Right.
But I realized as I crossed those burning sands of 60 plus,
Right. Sure.
change is like an ocean liner.
Right.
Now, it takes a while.
Now that's interesting because I want to build on that because you're talking about change being an ocean liner. It doesn't come fast. You're talking about implicit bias and, that many people have. So I want to ask you how you approach it from a jury standpoint, because that the folks that you get in, you don't get to ask a jury question and, voir dire and say, okay, everybody that's biased, raise your hand. You know what I mean? And in fact, racism, bias, take your pick. It's kind of like the undiagnosed disease, right? Sure. So how do you get, it sounds like what you might have to do to be successful is you get them to make an exception for their own rule, for their own thought. How do you deal with that?
Joe, it's counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm.
First, you gotta confront the elephant in the courtroom.
Sure.
Okay? You can't run from it.
Right. You
can't be afraid of polluting the jury pool, which young lawyers are always afraid about. That right. If I talk about this difficult thing, it's gonna annoy some of the jurors and they may not like me as well.
Right.
What you have to understand, and lawyers have to understand, is jurors come into the room with these preconceptions anyway.
Right.
And there's nothing that a stranger who they just sit next to is going to say to them that will change their preconceptions anyway.
Right.
And I would rather hear that redneck tell me they're a redneck in front of me during jury selection than hear their redneck thoughts in the hallway after I lost the trial.
Sure. Right.
That's what you got to understand.
Yeah.
So I look at it straight on. I practice a concept that I've learned through my followings of Jerry Spence from Wyoming.
Sure, I know who that is, yeah.
Okay, and Jerry Spence has he talks about drama and putting yourself dramatically into your trial. And you have to generate and develop trust with your audience. And basically you say, I'm gonna show you mine so you can show me yours.
Right.
I'm gonna tell you what I have concerns about so that you'll then help. I'm gonna peel away the veneer as the lawyer. so that you'll be more open to talking about your biases as well. Because we all come to the process with biases, man. I love the Lakers, bruh.
Right.
I hate the Clippers.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I sit
If
in there
I
in that
was,
game with my arms folded.
I'm rooting for the Clippers. Whoever plays the Clippers is my next favorite team.
Right.
Yeah, I don't care who they play. I'm rooting for everybody who's playing the Clippers.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Now,
sir.
if Kawhi Leonard had a lawsuit going on,
Right.
and he was being sued by LeBron James, I would not be the best juror to be in that lawsuit. I could be fair, but I ain't the best juror.
Right. Sure.
Or I represented O.J. Simpson.
Right.
Still, to this day,
Sure.
some people have feelings about that.
Absolutely.
I used to run away from it and not even talk about it soon after the case.
Yeah.
They always introduce the lawyers and they'll ask, does any juror recognize any of the lawyers? And I would hold my head down and try to just become smaller and not draw attention.
Right.
Now, I mentioned it myself.
Yeah.
I was O.J. Simpson's lawyers, and somebody hates me because of that. Who hates me by that reason?
Right. Yeah. Go on.
And then,
right.
and then I'm like Phil Donahue. Phil Donahue was the talk show host that went around the audience and got everyone else. Who believes that? Who else believes that?
Right.
And juror number one said, I don't like OJ. And I'll say, who else doesn't like OJ? And number five, I don't like OJ either. And who else doesn't like OJ?
Right.
Because if I'm suing cops, anybody who doesn't like OJ probably doesn't like someone suing the cops.
Right.
And as a younger lawyer, I try to gloss over or stay away from that bright piece of information that's important.
Right.
You can't do it in this 21st century America because everybody's going to Google the lawyers as soon as they get in the hallway at lunchtime.
Right.
And when the judge says, don't Google anybody, everybody, anyway, they're going to do it on purpose. That's human nature.
Right. Sure.
You got to understand that because of implicit bias, even Black people are afraid of Black people.
Sure. Right.
Because of implicit bias, even Black people are victims of brainwashing that young Black males are more dangerous. That's the irony. We are victims of the brainwashing as well. But because we know other Black folks that ain't dangerous, we got some balance.
Sure.
You see?
Right.
Because we have other Black people that we love, we have some balance.
Right.
Because we see other Black people that don't start fighting and are in gangs, we have some balance.
Right.
Cops don't have the balance. They live in Simi Valley, but they work in South LA. In California, you cannot require a public servant to live in the community where he works, unless you're running for an office. So people patrol South LA for the sheriff's department, for example, but they live an hour away, literally on the 101 freeway. So how can they have any sense of connection when they see a brother running with some clothes in his hands?
Absolutely.
Every police officer, Joe, can give you a seemingly benign traffic stop that turned deadly.
Right.
Every police officer can give you a benign domestic violence call where somebody pulled a gun unexpectedly.
Yeah.
But you got to understand, man, and cops will use that all the time to justify their actions.
Right.
Cops become cops because of the violence, not in spite of the violence. They call that action. Cops want action. They don't want to sit around in the car and not do anything all day long. Some people jump out of airplanes for a living.
Right.
That scares the shit out of me, but they do it.
Dangerous, right? Yeah.
Some people drive race cars fast for a living.
Right.
That would scare me to death, but they do it.
Right.
I don't want to be a cop. It's too dangerous.
Right. Sure.
Okay? But if you do it, you got to accept the danger as part of the job. You can't take on the job and complain that it's dangerous. That's why you're a cop. That's why you're trained.
Right. Sure.
Cops love two things, my brother.
Right.
They love their guns,
Right.
and they love other cops.
Mm. Ooh.
And in Los Angeles County, the message that I want to send high and low is there are gangs in Los Angeles County that are terrorizing our community. They wear khaki and green. They carry a gun.
Wow.
But they are gangs. They have initiations. They have rites of passage.
Sure.
They all carry tattoos that are similar, and they have inking parties.
Yeah.
The irony is our leadership knows about these gangs among the county sheriffs because it's been going on longer than you have been alive, literally, my brother.
Right. Sure. Sure.
Longer than your staff where you're recording this, literally, my brothers and sisters.
Right.
There are gangs, and you never know about it until you're victimized.
Right. My daughter is real interested in social justice and doing journalism to tell stories and things like this. Here's an opportunity I get to tell her, okay, here's social justice 101 with someone doing something that's very, very important on this front. Not long after I interviewed Carl, and this is why we're breaking in here, he had talked about a case called Dijon Kizzee, an individual named Dijon Kizzee who had an altercation with Los Angeles County Sheriff, ended up getting shot about 15 times, was killed, which is...
Family members of Dijon Kizzee and their attorneys striking back at Sheriff Alex Villanueva and his department's investigation. The black man was shot and killed by sheriff's deputies while running away when they tried to stop him on his bike for a traffic violation.
Needs to be in prison like the other people, not on the street, no jobs, no anything. They don't deserve to have a badge on them. They come in our neighborhoods just for this damn reason.
Attorney Carl Douglas says their independent investigation found Kizzee was shot 19 times.
There's an open question as to whether or not he was a threat to police, open question as to whether or not he actually was holding a gun, which is what is being claimed. About a week after that, he did a press conference. He talked about the case. I was interested in it, of course, because he'd mentioned it. He did a press conference along with Ben Crump, who's on the case, somebody who he's a little senior to, and Ben Crump actually looks up to, and you've seen Ben Crump in some of everything. But check out this. This gives you a perfect example. Check out this story, as told through the press release, as told through the press conference, and get a sense for what Carl Douglas does all day, every day. It's just that a lot of times the cameras aren't moving and watching it. But this is another situation where, as he's done for decades, you've got someone that was shot that, is being alleged should not have been. So check this out, and this will connect the dots with what he's doing right now today, and how for him the struggle is real, and the battle never changes.
We are here today standing strong for justice. We seek justice on behalf of the family of Dijon Kizzee. Mr. Kizzee was shot 19 times on August 31st, 2020. I repeat, he was shot 19 times. And I can care less what Sheriff Villanueva says, seeking to justify that lack of humanity. 19 times firing into a man's body says to me there was no humanity, and that there was a warrior mentality that permeates law enforcement across America. And until we change that warrior mentality to more of a guardian mentality, there's going to be more Fletcher Fairs who've lost loved ones. And 19 times firing a weapon tells me that there was contagious fire. That officers fired not because they perceived a threat, but because they fired because they thought that was what they had to do to maintain their integrity back in the office. This case is personal to me. Elongated because Mr. Kizzee was on the ground when those grazing wounds were inflicted. E5 and E12, he was on the ground. E13 was in his buttocks. Clearly, he was on the ground when those shots were fired. None of those were fatal wounds, however. Dr. Heiserod tells me number 7 and number 8 were potentially fatal wounds, and they were in rapid succession of the other. He tells me number 10 perforated the upper portion of Mr. Kizzee's lung, and that was a eventual fatal wound because it filled the upper half of his left lung with blood.
Unbelievable. Tell me about this, because we talked a little bit about it legislatively, and you mentioned one particular thing that the state legislature failed to do. Tell me about some of the things that we ought to do legislatively that you see from your standpoint that would help in the war of justice. And then let's talk also about culture, because one of the things that you'll notice, you said, hey, we've got a black DA, and there's been one prosecution of, in the last 12 years. But we also, one of the things that we said that we wanted after the uprisings in '92 is more diversity on the LAPD. And actually we got the diversity, right? But we're still dealing with a lot of the problems that we've been dealing with, because if we weren't, you wouldn't have anything to do.
Young people, I remind them all the time, we must walk and chew gum at the same time, brother.
Sure.
We got to protest and vote.
Right.
We got to protest and complain to our legislators.
Right.
We got to protest and give money when you can.
Right.
We have to walk and chew gum at the same time. We got to understand that politicians, man, they listen to two things:
right.
Those who pay and those who vote.
Right, sure.
I mean, that's from the beginning of time.
Right, yeah.
Those who pay money have influence. Those who vote have influence.
Right.
When in doubt, follow the money.
Right.
Now, racism is institutionalized. I don't care what our attorney general says.
Right.
Los Angeles had a black mayor for 20 years.
Sure.
He was a former police sergeant.
Yes, he was.
Tom Bradley did not want the cops to be beating up black people, I don't think.
Right.
Tom Bradley wanted it to be better for black and brown people in Los Angeles, I think. But not even a black mayor could make a difference because it's institutionalized. What you have to do is to change the culture, my brother, because race is the predominant knee on the necks of black and brown people. I said it.
Right.
And I say when the knee is on my neck, I don't care what color the knee is.
Right, right, sure.
I represent a brother, Dijon Kizzee. On August 31st, he was shot 15 times in the back, Joe.
Wow.
His shooters were 2 Latin sheriff deputies, Joe.
Wow.
I dare say if one of those 2 had been black, he would not have been shot 15 times in the back.
Yes.
I dare say if he had been Latin, he would not have been shot 15 times in the back. There was another shooting in June. Andrew Guardado, a Latin guy. They said he had a gun. His shooters were Latin. He was shot 5 times in the back. It's a terrible indictment. But it is one that I say holds true, regrettably. What can be done? We got to hire more black police officers and sheriff deputies. We've got to change the warrior culture. Police officers are trained killers. They are not mental health experts. A warrior culture leads to an us versus them mentality. That's why you got troops and tanks on the streets of Portland. It's an us versus them mentality. Cops ain't got no business dealing with the homeless. They got no business dealing when somebody calls 911 because my daddy wants to kill himself and he has a stick. They got no business dealing with drug addiction people who are acting crazy in the streets. They tell you they are not social workers. We should believe them when they tell you that. I don't think we should defund the police because that's bad messaging.
Yes, you were talking about messaging in that thing about a week ago, and I thought that was
You
huge.
gotta, I'm a trial lawyer. I'm a storyteller, brother.
Right.
Messaging is everything.
Yeah, that's right.
Defund the police is as bad as abolish ICE.
Right, sure.
That didn't go nowhere either because you can't abolish ICE.
Right.
That ain't ever gonna win. You're
Right.
playing into the Republican narrative then.
Right.
You can't ever defund the police.
Right.
That is never gonna win.
Right, sure.
You can reimagine how
Yes.
funds can be used differently.
Yes, yes, yes.
If 30, it's amazing, man. I ask you this question, Joe Richardson.
Sir.
You are a woke brother,
Right.
proudly so.
Right, right.
If you were to estimate what percentage of the arrests in 2019 of all of the arrests were for a violent crime, there's violence everywhere in the streets. Joe Richardson, what percentage of the arrests in the United States are for violent crimes in 2019? How many were for violent arrests? What percentage would you say?
I don't know for sure, but I will tell you this, the messaging and the presentation that you get would lead you to believe that the percentage is high.
25, 30%, right?
Yeah, yeah, at least.
The messaging thinks that.
Right.
Joe Richardson, in 2019, the last year that the FBI kept statistics,
Right.
5% of all arrests were for violent arrests.
Wow, 5%.
Joe Richardson,
Sir.
more people were arrested for possessing weed
Wow.
in the United States than for a violent crime.
Wow.
I didn't believe that shit, man, until I looked at myself. I didn't believe that shit.
Keep it real.
I had to look it up myself. The FBI's own stats confirmed it.
5%. Wow, it's heavy.
The narrative is the reason there's a problem.
Right.
The narrative is the reason in California they didn't even want to act. In 2020, didn't want to act.
Right.
After George Floyd and James Blake and Ahmaud Arbery and the brother in Atlanta whose name I've even forgotten.
Right, right, right.
Right?
Yes, sir.
At the Wendy's. I've forgotten his name already.
Yeah, me too, tell you the truth, be honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. You're right. So how do you deal with this? And this has been great, man, but I'll end with this because I think that this is really important for people. And you know, as a daughter who's a fellow Wildcat who's going into journalism and wants to tell stories that need to be told, how do you, as a professional, and how would you advise people, whether they're lawyers or whether they're regular humans, how do we navigate the influence of the media? You know, a lot of us, you know, it's funny, you know, people like to post about thing X or thing Y. So like right now, a lot of people posting on Facebook, they're like, well, how good is Ben Crump really at what he does? Or how good is this one at what they do? Are they really trying those cases? And, you know, that kind of thing. But there is something to be said, keeping it real, for understanding how the media works at the very least, because that's going to shape the window that you go through. If you're kicking down a door, going through a back window, going through the garage because you got a garage door opener or whatever else, how do you navigate that, and how do regular citizens navigate that in a way that hopefully gets us towards truth and towards justice?
Two thoughts. I'm a believer it is only the squeaky wheel that gets any oil.
Yeah.
One.
Right.
I'm a squeaky wheel, man.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Two, how do you eat an elephant?
Right.
One bite at a time.
Yes.
Okay. How do you chop down a motherfucking redwood tree,
Right.
Joe?
Right.
How do you chop down the redwood tree of racism? One whack at a time.
Right. Sure.
Joe, I'm tired of whacking too.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But eventually,
Right.
I gotta believe that motherfucking tree's gonna fall too, man.
Right. Sure.
I did not think a woman could get an abortion whenever she wanted to.
Right.
One by one piece by piece, America ate that elephant.
Right. Sure.
I never thought two men could get married if they wanted to. Two men?
Sure.
Whack by whack. They whacked that tree.
Right.
And that tree fell.
Right.
I used to meet a guy in the parking lot of Jack in the Box to buy some weed. I go into a store now and I pay sales tax, brother.
Lord have mercy. You
understand what I'm saying?
That's what I do. Yes, sir.
How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Right.
How do you chop down a redwood tree?
Right.
One whack at a time.
Right. Sure.
I am here every day taking a bite out of that elephant.
Right.
I'm here every day, man, whacking on that tree.
Right.
Okay? Hopefully I'll see the motherfucker fall.
Right.
You feel me?
Yes, sir. All day long.
Otherwise, I'm going to pass on the axe to the next motherfucker. Your turn.
Right. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I'm taking the axe from John Lewis.
Yeah, that's right.
You feel me?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I'm taking the axe from Kareem
Right.
and Muhammad Ali.
Yes, absolutely.
and Tommy Smith.
Right. Yeah.
You feel me?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay? It's the same tree.
Right. Yeah, I'm right there with you.
So, there you go.
Well, a lot of people know me. They know that I say real talk sometimes. This, ladies and gentlemen, was real talk. I want to thank this legend and this man that's on the front lines, doing it all day and every day, whether you're looking or not. Carl Douglas, I appreciate you. Best to you and to yours and to your partner. And I look forward to seeing you and being there with you on the front line, sir.
Hey, Joe, Douglas Hicks Law,
Yes,
CED,
yes.
ESQ on all platforms. And
Yes.
brother, please have me back next time. Next
Right.
time.
Oh,
Please.
man, we're going to do it. Absolutely. Next time, we're going to get some war stories in, too. So
Do it.
good stuff. Well, thank you, sir. I really appreciate it. I told you that was real talk, right? Straight up no chaser, no holds barred. Carl Douglas has been doing this almost 40 years, so none of us have time to waste, but not the least of which is him. He doesn't have time to waste either. So I appreciate him spending some time with us. Here's a couple takeaways. First of all, you have to be reminded there's a lot of fronts on the war of justice, related to justice. And civil litigation pertaining to police brutality is really important, a very important one, for which he is a pillar, for a couple of reasons. First of all, because sometimes the civil litigation side can affect the criminal side. We're seeing some of that kind of pan out in Louisville right now, while things are still a little bit up in the air of what's going to happen based on the grand jury testimony being released. The second one is sometimes the only justice the family gets is the civil side. And for as difficult as that was many, many years ago, it's still difficult now. It's still possible to get success in front of a jury. That's why most cases still do get settled on some level, even though they're hard fought. So that's an important thing to look at. Another thing Carl talked about, he talked about the influence of politics. He said a couple things. First of all, young people don't always get listened to in this equation because they, as it pertains to politicians, because they don't have the money or the votes. They're not reliable those ways. And so they're listened to a bit less, okay? He also talked about legislation. You know, California is a liberal state, but we weren't able to get that bill passed where police would go into a registry if they were fired in one place. It would seem to be a very natural thing to do. It seemed to be a pro-progressive, pro-liberal type thing to do, but we didn't do it in California. So to the extent, I'm not saying all police officers are bad. Carl Douglas sees them because that's who he sues. But for the ones that are bad, for the ones that are in a difficult, terrible culture situation, there's a lot of it, and it's a stronghold, and it is very difficult. The culture issues that he's talking about are very, very real, and that's why change, as it pertains to areas that need to that actually need to happen, are so slow. So the other thing that I would say is that it's just important to have these discussions. I want to open people's eyes to things that are out there. Hopefully you got something from Carl Douglas. Hopefully you got something from plaintiffs' attorneys and what plaintiffs' attorneys do and how important it is in dealing with larger societal issues. Hopefully you got something from that where you don't minimize the fact that when these gentlemen hit, these folks hit from a plaintiff's side, they may hit significantly. But having done catastrophic personal injury and wrongful death, I can tell you that no one that lost a life puts a value on the life that is then paid in full and they're made whole by $1 million payment or by a $12 million payment in the case of Breonna Taylor. All of us, not most of us, all of us would rather have our life back, would rather have our family member back, and would rather have our situation back and feel like this society is just and fair to us. So I appreciate what Carl Douglas does, not only as an attorney, but as an African-American man. And I appreciate him taking time with us. So once again, Joe Speak Podcast, Joe Richardson, like usual. Check us out at JoeSpeak_MWA. Let folks know that we're out here and we're putting out some good content so that hopefully you can take some information and run with it. And let's do this thing together. Get a little bit more just, one day, one interview, and one guest at a time. All right, peace out.